Hello, everybody. Welcome to WOTS Weekly Features. Today's guest is Amanda Carvery-Taylor, author of A Love Letter to Afrikville. We'll be talking about photography in storytelling and the importance of place and community. I'm Yelly, and I'll be your host. WOTS Toronto operates on land that is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Paytune First Nations, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. This territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Anishinaabeg and Allied Nations to care for and share the resources around the Great Lakes in peace. We encourage you to educate yourself about the land that you live on wherever you're tuning in from. All right, and Amanda Carvery-Taylor was born and raised in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Her father grew up in Afrikville, and she grew up understanding the importance of what was lost. The fight to retain Afrikville's history has guided and shaped her desire to document and celebrate the community. Thank you so much for joining us today, Amanda.
Thank you for having me.
I have to say, I finished reading your book this morning and I absolutely loved it. It just felt so loving and warm and just like a big hug. It was so stunning.
That's the goal. I
Good.
wanted everyone to feel the love in our community.
Absolutely. Could
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about your book for folks that don't know what it's about necessarily, and maybe what inspired you to create that art piece?
So my book is called A Love Letter to Afrikville. It's about my father's home community of Afrikville. And if you're not familiar with the story of Afrikville, I'll encourage you to look up the very detailed history because that's not what goes into my book. I wanted to steer away from historical facts. I think we have a ton of resources that tell us about the tragedies that happened in Africville and the injustice and things like that. But it doesn't really talk about the community. So I kind of grew up with this feeling of like, I hear one thing about my community, but I feel something totally different.
Mm.
And it was just really like eye-opening to realize that other people don't get to see my community the way that I see them. And so that's kind of where the inspiration came from. I wanted people to see that there's more to Afrikville than these stories about a dump and a prison and things, being raised and the pain that they've experienced. They definitely did experience a lot of pain, but I want them to understand what was actually lost was the community. It was being together, being with each other, having to grow up with all of your family members close by and the safety and security. So I just wanted to talk about all the love we have there.
Sure, absolutely. Um, you mentioned that you wanted to steer away from like the history behind it necessarily.
Yeah.
How did that decision shape the research that you did do behind the book? What did that look like?
So my research was mostly oral because these people are still alive. They're still here. We can ask them. We can talk to them. And I find it so strange when people do research projects on Afrikville and don't want to actually talk to the people who live there. They're still here. This is a great resource we all have. We should be using them and accessing that information. So yeah, it was a lot of oral history. And I was really trying to just pull out the emotions of it. Like, what did it feel like living there? What did you experience? And what were like your day-to-day lives like? I just want that information.
It seemed when I was reading it almost like the process was very collaborative because you worked with so many people in that way.
Yeah, it was definitely a community project. I say that all the time. I mean, there is no book without all of these people. And it was all of them willing to sit and share stories and talk to me. Sometimes we'd spend a whole day just sitting there, just telling stories and listening. And I was just so overjoyed to hear these things. There's a lot I didn't know about our community that I think our elders assume we know, but if it's not something that's being talked about, then we actually don't know that information. So it was really eye-opening, really beautiful.
Absolutely. Did how did you decide? You mentioned that you would sit down for like hours and days with these folks. How did you decide what parts of what they said actually went into the book? What was the thought process behind that?
So it was pretty complicated because there were so many beautiful things that these folks were telling me. I kind of just wanted to include it all. Obviously, we can't. So I kind of took their like sessions. I do these sessions where I'd sit down with either individuals or groups, small groups, because we tend to feed off of each other when we start telling stories and reminding each other of these things that happen. So I go through all that and I just record everything, take some notes, and then I go back and listen to it. And I mean, of course, there's always stories that stand out to you or things you find more interesting or other people have mentioned. So you kind of just weed through it and make a process of it. Okay, we've talked about these things already. Let's focus on these things in their stories. So yeah.
Very cool. Um, Something that I found was so different about your book is that there are many books and stories out there about folks entering these communities and recording the histories of the people there, but you already had connections to this community and you already knew these people. Um, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that difference there, how what is special or what is unique about recording these histories as somebody who already had that connection established as opposed to somebody kind of walking in from the outside world?
Um, so I think my personal connection obviously allowed me inside very quickly and easily. But I did have a lot, like Afrikville is a big community, and I do have lots of people who don't know me. So there were lots of people saying, well, who is she? What is her connection to Afrikville? Why is she doing this? And what are her intentions with this work? Which is always a nervous thing for communities. Uh, but as soon as they realized, I'm a descendant as well, and I just love my community, and this is my way to give back to them, everybody opened up. And there's like a closeness in our community too. So I don't think a lot of other people would get the stories that didn't go into the book. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of hidden little things in there that are mentioned that probably only community members will pick up on. Um, but it's a very tight knit community, and they are very protective because they have been very hurt by people coming in looking for this information to profit off of for their own needs, and they just kind of disappear, and we never hear from them again. So
Sure.
this project was really special because it was all of us working together and getting this out. It's a project that benefits our community. The royalties go back into the Afrikville Heritage Trust Scholarship Fund so that we could keep contributing to our next generation. And, just the closeness of being able to be with your own community and tell these stories comfortably and just get in there. And, it's just like a celebration every time I met with anybody.
Absolutely. You could definitely feel that close-knitness as well in the book. One of the,
Yeah.
like, moments of joy for me when I was reading this book was when somebody would mention something that a previous person would mention and the
Yeah.
connections form, and that was so, just joyful to see these, how close everybody really was.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very close community. So all these stories are all connected. Everybody kind of knows everybody else or has a connection to each other in this community because they really depended on each other to make it work. It worked so beautifully.
Mhm. I would love to talk about the relationship between photography and storytelling. There's quite a lot of photos in the book that play an equal part, I would say, as the actual written word in it.
Yeah.
What what drove that decision to include all of those photos in it?
So the thing is that it's probably a photo book before it
Mm,
had words. I like to take photos. This is what I do. So I started going to our Africville reunions and saying, no, we're not documenting our elders. A lot of them are not on social media. Um, so I have a good camera and I know I can take good pictures. Uh, so I will definitely do that for anybody in the community. And I
Hmm.
kind of just started like documenting our celebrations together, and that evolved into a little photo book of our 35th anniversary reunion. And we donated that to the museum. And then the thing was, though, at that gathering, when I walked in and said I have a camera and I'd like to take photos of people just to document, everybody kind of pulled me in different directions really quickly. So I didn't get any names or descriptions or anything. So as I was putting together the photo book, we were like, it would just really would be beautiful if we had all the proper names and, maybe if we had a few words from everybody. And that just kind of evolved into like, why are we not listening to these stories? Why are we not talking about this? So I think it should just be portraits with their stories about life there. This is it's something that keeps us so connected. And as descendants, we're very spread out sometimes. So there's descendants all around the world who don't get to come home for a reunion or don't get to sit down with their elders and their family, but we're all so connected. You can reach for this book, and there's somebody in there who has a connection to you. There's stories in there that mean stuff to you from home. So it's just a project of like these things need to go together. We need both pieces to efficiently tell those stories. And a big part of it was the candid photos as well, because I wanted people to understand that when we're sitting around talking about Africa, it's happiness, it's love, we're smiling, we're laughing, we're making jokes. Um, just because the feeling when you talk about Africa in the news or the media always feels so heavy and negative. And yes, there's a big negative part associated with Africa, but we still have a whole bunch of happiness in our community. And I really wanted folks to see that.
Hmm. I love that you mentioned the candid photos because those were some of my favorites. Like those were the ones that made me smile because they were
Yeah.
like everyone was smiling just like in the moment.
Well, that's it, is I want people to feel that, when some of these stories are so funny and things, and I'm like, it doesn't translate as though you're hearing it
Hmm.
directly from these folks. So at least see that when they're telling me these stories, it's nothing but happiness. We're having a great time here. At least, we just really enjoy talking about Africa.
Sure. Was that something that you thought about when putting the book together, like how to translate the fact that they're orally saying this to you onto a piece of paper?
That was a big part of it because I wanted people to see, the joy and the happiness. And we had originally planned for just like formal portraits, but then with COVID, we kind of moved some stuff outside and did some things for accessibility reasons in folks' homes and things like that. So um, the candid ones were very important because I just wanted the emotions of this book. I didn't want this to be about fact and date or like those kinds of information. I wanted you to feel Africa.
Absolutely. I that definitely rings true to me as a reader of that book.
So thank you.
I also there's a portion of the book that is restoration with photos from history from the
Yeah.
past. What was that process like behind finding those photos and bringing them into the story?
Oh, that was such a blessing. Those were just photos that people brought with them to sessions and just said, "Hey, I thought you might like to see these." And I was like, like these are photos we all need to be seeing from our community. Um, Photography was not something that was so readily accessible back then. So I feel like all these photos are such treasures that we just need to preserve. So I always say I'm here to restore for free any any photos of my community just so that we have them, just because it's just so valuable to our history. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's so important, like, as somebody who also is disconnected kind of from their community in that way, I love seeing when my mom pulls up old photos of when everybody was, like, younger and they're happy, and that was very touching, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's see, so I wanna talk about the Afrikville as maybe a character even in the book, there's a lot about how the place gives back to the community and food and water and the location itself. What is the importance behind that place and community that you wanted to include?
Um, Africa, like I never had the honor of living there myself,
Mm,
but the area is still kind of sacred to us. Kind of,
mm,
uh, we go down there. I still go down and like fish with my dad just because it's good memories. Stuff that he remembers from childhood that he's been able to pass on to me, even without the community existing there. Um, but the location was actually such a blessing to everybody because they never knew hunger.
mm,
Everybody had enough, and then being together, they had enough land. There were animals and gardens and different resources through the community. Lots of stores were available, and Africa was actually like the happening place to go. Like everybody I ran into when I was making this book, I'd be like, yes, I'm working on a project, about my dad's community in Africville. And everybody would be like, oh my goodness, I used to go down there on Saturday nights. And let me tell you, it was just the place you really wanted to hang out in and really get that experience of happiness down there. Um, some of the things folks told me, just about being able to come home after work and feel the safety of your community and sit under a tree and have a drink and relax in the shade kind of thing. And I look at that and that's something that we still do. I still go down there and sit by a tree and read my
mm.
book or something. I just it's a good place to relax and you feel safe and you feel comforted. So yeah, we were really, really lucky to have the location. And as much as people might talk negatively about the dump, and yes, there was a city dump near Africville,
Mm.
it also provided a lot of resources for folks to scavenge and make money or things like that. Even kids would, find things to play with or build, or it allowed a lot of their creativity to come through. There were ponds to skate on in the winter, like always a place to play, always people around to jump in and interact with kids. It was just, so beautiful to be around such safety all the time. Uh, you just always have everything around you that you possibly need. So,
Absolutely. That's such something so special, something that doesn't
yeah,
happen often.
no,
Yeah.
definitely not. And like just the security of like, if you were a single parent and you needed to work, you know
Mm,
that a sibling lives next door or a close trusted friend lives next door. So you can actually trust your kids to be home. You know that somebody's there. You know that everybody's safe. You know nothing's going to happen. And it really allowed people to do what they needed to do to get by, to survive, to have good lives, to have beautiful lives, and very full lives.
absolutely. Was there anything that surprised you about the book or about the process of creating it?
Um, I was surprised to learn a lot of things about Africa.
Mm,
When I learned how many people who were not Black that lived in Africa, it's something that is kind of like always associated with our Black community. But there were lots of community members that were not Black, so it was definitely a place for anybody of color to come and feel a safety when
mm.
they were visiting Halifax or thinking about staying in Halifax or anything like that. Um, so it was just that was a little eye-opening because I've heard stories, but when you hear like a random story, it doesn't seem like such a fact. But when you're talking to everybody and they're saying, yes, this is definitely
Mhm.
how life was, and you're seeing pictures and you're like, okay, this is yeah, not what they're describing to us. But
Sure,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's definitely interesting and just I learned a lot of other things that people asked not to be in the book, but it's definitely a great process that taught me so much more about my community. And I just, yeah, I can't even wait to learn more. I'm like, I still will do sessions with folks just to keep learning.
Mm,
There's always more perspectives, always more facts.
very cool. Are there
Yeah.
any Are there any other places or stories that you have yet to explore that you'd like to?
I would really, well, I have a lot of people asking for this kind of style of book for their communities. Nova Scotia
Oh,
has a
cool.
lot of Black communities here. Um, so now we're kind of looking at creating a program because I'm not a person that would go into another community and write on their experience. I can write about my
Mhm.
own community because that's my experience, and I feel comfortable to do that. So what I'm going to do is try and recruit youth and teach them the skills that they'll need, and I can work with them and support them and help them to, sit with their elders and get these stories for their communities, and then we can decide where the project can benefit their community specifically. That way, everybody learns some stuff. We get some skills. We get some other young Black photographers out there ready to document their communities. We've got people connecting with their elders, learning more about their communities and their culture, um, and then we'll have something that's beautiful that benefits everybody. So I think it's a good idea that will
Mhm.
hopefully get off the
Sounds
ground
so
here.
wonderful.
Yeah.
For sure. What is maybe like one piece of advice that you would give to those folks who are going to set out into their own communities and do this work?
My one piece of advice is definitely to write authentically. There's
Mm.
a closeness that we have in our communities, and when I was writing this book and I'm saying references like around the turn or up the hill and things like that, people don't always understand what that is. But I wanted to include it because that's how we talk to each other. That's how we are together. We still talk about Afrikville like it's right here, and we all know these references whether we've lived there or not. So just to be able to express yourself in the way that is authentic really gets your feelings across. Really shows people who you are, and I find that's what people want to see more.
Such good advice. Awesome. How can we, as readers, support you and your book and all of the fantastic work that you do?
You can definitely get copies of my book from Fernwood Publishing directly on their
On
website.
there.
Yeah. You can also order from the Africville Museum, and supporting the book is the best way you can support the community because all the royalties go right back into our scholarship fund. We're ready to fund the next generation. And I was lucky enough to see the scholarship winners this year, and they are just incredible. I have so much faith in you know, the future of our community here because of these youth that are coming up. So, yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
Excellent. Is there anything that you'd like to mention that we haven't covered already?
Um, just that I really love seeing more happy Black stories. I want to
Mm.
see more of our writers not be afraid to tell about the good things. I know there's lots of negative history that we need to acknowledge, we need to talk about, needs to definitely be in the forefront of our minds, especially this day and age with our social justice work. But don't be afraid to celebrate. Don't be afraid to also remember joy and happiness and love and the things that your community gives to you because the fight gets very weary when we just keep trudging along and not taking those moments to celebrate as well.
For readers as well, so important
Yeah,
to celebrate that joy.
everybody, yes.
Mhm.
Celebrate Black joy.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today, Amanda. It's been a pleasure and
Thank you so
just
much for
absolutely a
having me.
delight. Thank
Yeah, thank
you.
you so much.
All right, everybody, to get your own copy of A Love Letter to Afrikville, go to fernwoodpublishing.ca. This has been today's WOTS Weekly Feature. Tune in on Thursday for our Weekly Features finale, where we'll be in conversation with Nathan Maharaj from Kobo. From dis- for discounts and deals, go to toronto.thewordonthestreet.ca/weekly-features. And from all of us at WOTS, happy reading!